Hi IVF Mummas, thank you for joining me for my second video. You may notice that I have a third video from June last year. That was a very amateur video that I made, and these are still very amateur, so you can check that out. I've left it there for kind of shits and giggles, but we'll leave it there. Today's video is going to be about Asherman syndrome. Asherman syndrome is pretty rare. If you have Asherman syndrome or you know somebody who does, leave a comment below because I would love to read about your journey and your experiences with Asherman syndrome. So the reason why I brought Asherman syndrome up as my first video, I guess, is that it's pretty rare. It's pretty uncommon, but I had it. And I say I had it in the most weird way because I did have it and I don't have it anymore. And usually when you get Asherman syndrome, you don't lose it. So what is it? Asherman syndrome is an acquired disorder. Anything acquired means that you weren't born with it. So you've acquired it somehow in your life through some form of trauma or whatever. In the case of Asherman syndrome, it's acquired through a D&C or a C-section. And you may require a D&C for an elective abortion or a miscarriage D&C. So sometimes after a miscarriage, they'll need to perform a D&C to, with a curate and kind of take your baby out, remove your baby. So of the people that have a D&C, 20% of those women are likely to develop Asherman syndrome. So it's pretty rare, but not completely uncommon. And so when I guess we'll take you back to my journey and how that started. So that started in 2016 when I had a curette. I had a bit of a issue going on and I had a curette done in 2016, and prior to that curette I had never ever had any issues with my periods. They were always on time. I never had any pain. Like, they were your ideal period, textbook period that every girl would probably dream of. So I had this done in 2016, and straight after the procedure I didn't get my period. Like, I never got my period since. And this went on for about a year and a half. And in this year and a half, I didn't just leave it. I mean, I was going to doctors and I was asking, where is my period? However, in 2016, I also experienced a really traumatic event, and the doctors kept putting it down to that. Oh, you're just stressed. Oh, you're just, going through a bit of trauma. And I kind of thought the same thing too. I thought, well, maybe that's what it was at the beginning. And then every single month I wouldn't get a period, but I was due for my period. I would be in excruciating pain to the point where I nearly took myself to the emergency room because I was in so much pain. And I would be, really bloated. And so I then decided, this isn't right. My period's probably not coming back. Where is it? So I went to a gynecologist, and this was well before we'd started our IVF journey. So I'd gone to a gynecologist and I'd said to her, what's going on? She checked all my hormones. They were all fine. She put me on progesterone. It sent me absolutely loopy. And my period still hadn't come. And so by then I'd Googled a bunch of stuff and I'd stumbled across the Asherman syndrome. And I thought, this is me. I had a D&C. I hadn't had my period since. I was in excruciating pain at the time of my period. I possibly have Asherman. So I brought it up with my gynecologist, and she was like, Bree, in my entire time that I have ever practiced as a gynecologist, I've never seen Asherman syndrome before. Well, maybe you have for the first time. Might be me. And so she finally referred me on to have a hysterosalpingogram, which is an X-ray guided procedure where they insert a catheter with some ink in it, and they can kind of see through the X-ray machine, what's going on in your uterus. And I had this procedure done, and they couldn't even get the catheter past my cervix. So he tried, and it was extremely painful, and he couldn't get the catheter through the cervix to even inject the ink. So I then went and from my gynecologist, I had a referral to an Ashermans Syndrome specialist in Sydney called Professor Van Kai. So if you do have Ashermans syndrome and you're in Australia, I'd highly recommend that you check out Professor Van Kai. I'll leave a link somehow in the description box. He specializes in Ashermans, and I had a consultation with him, and he diagnosed me with stage 2 Ashermans. So Ashermans is staged into from stage 1 to stage 4, depending on the level of scarring that you have. So stage 1 being minimal scarring, stage 4 being lots of scarring. So I had the consultation with Professor Van Kai, and then that following month I got my period. It was really weird. I got my period, and every single month after that I've now had my period. Anyways, I didn't think anything of it. I thought, great, my period's come back. Then we started IVF. And we started IVF because my partner had testicular cancer, so it's male factor. So I never really thought anything of it. Honestly, if I had my period and we didn't have to go through IVF, I would have never ever thought any more about this Asherman syndrome. I then had a discussion with my new IVF doctor about the whole thing that had gone on, and he requested that I have a saline infusion. This is another diagnostic tool that people can use to diagnose Asherman syndrome. The saline infusion came back all good. It was all fine. So they didn't think that I had Ashermans anymore. And when I probed this, I said to my doctor, where did my Ashermans go? Why do I not have Ashermans anymore? He said that possibly what has happened is that there's an abundance of anecdotal evidence, by the way, of this, that when they try and diagnose Ashermans with either a hysterosalpingogram, a saline infusion, or a hysteroscopy, the catheter itself can break the scarring. I don't know. That's what has happened to me, and it's bizarre and it's beyond my comprehension. I'm thankful it happened, but I don't have Ashermans anymore. This is not the story for many, many women though. Many women who have Asherman syndrome have Asherman syndrome forever. You may not know you have it though, because you may not just get amenorrhea. You may just get lighter periods than normal, and you might not think anything of it. You might just think that, oh well, IVF medications or my hormones might be a bit off because of my miscarriage, and you never question anything. So a really good discussion to have with your doctor would be, if you are noticing lighter periods after a D&C, is to have a hysteroscopy. I think that is, in my opinion, the creme de la creme of diagnostic tools for Asherman syndrome, because a saline infusion and a hysterosalpingogram don't really rule out Ashermans. So just because I had a saline infusion and it came back all good, I still had to go on and have a hysteroscopy to make sure. So a hysteroscopy is when they insert a catheter again with a little camera on it, and they can go in and just kind of have a look in your uterus to see where the scarring is and what the scarring looks like and how much there is. And so if there is scarring there, you're trying to have a baby, they can cut through, because how it scars, I will somehow attach a video here, like an image for to try and get it around your head. So let's say that's your uterus. The scarring kind of laces like that, and it varies. It depends obviously on your stage of Asherman's, how your scarring looks. But obviously if you have scarring in the uterus, which is your womb, placing an embryo in there is going to be, it's a bit hostile for an embryo to grow. So they need to remove that scarring first. And the idea is that they can burn it or cut the scarring. They can then insert a balloon to keep the formation of the uterus intact. However, the scarring will always come back, pretty much always come back, and there is a risk that you will create more scarring trying to remove the original scarring. So that's why it's really important to get a professional, a specialist in Asherman's to perform this procedure, and that's Professor Van Kai if you're in Australia. I've never had a procedure with Professor Van Kai. I'm not plugging him. I'm just saying that from my own research, he is the doctor for Asherman syndrome in Australia. So that's Asherman syndrome. It can affect your fertility, and it will if you have scarring, because when you think about it, you want your womb lining to be as thick and as, well, not as thick, but as receptive as possible. And so if you have scarring, it does create a hostile environment. So have those discussions with your doctor. I hope this has cleared up Asherman's syndrome for you. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird journey, and I think that everybody's journey with gynecological issues is different. And yeah, I'd love to hear from you if you have had Ashermans or you have Ashermans, have Ashermans syndrome. And thank you so much for joining me on my first video. It was a bit awkward, but thanks.